Welcome to European Society in the High Middle Ages. This is Melinda Klein. The 1100s witnessed the beginnings of political stability in Western Europe. Foreign invasions gradually declined. This stability gave people security in themselves and in their property. There were two factors that provided the foundation of economic recovery, contributing to a slow but consistent increase in the population. Number one, political order, and number two, safety and security offered by a military social class. Manorialism involved the services of the peasant class. Feudalism concerned the rights, powers, and lifestyles of the military elite. The two were linked because the landed warrior class depended on the labor of the peasants to work their estates. Peasants needed protection in exchange for rents, labor, and other services. When the peasant became a permanent part of the lord's labor force, he was called a serf, unable to leave the manor without the lord of the manor's consent. By the year 600, perhaps 60% of the population of Western Europe had been reduced to serfdom. Feudal Europe offered aristocrats security and privilege, symbolizing the medieval period. All the while, political power became a private affair for the lord, and as such, a new government form emerged: feudalism. In the early Middle Ages, Europe had a relatively small population. By the 12th and 13th century, however, the number of people had doubled from 38 to 74 million. What accounted for this tremendous increase? For one thing, more land in Europe was put to agricultural uses, and by the 1100s, the Viking invasions were mostly at an end. Combined with this, by the 12th century, Europeans had begun to farm in new ways. First, the climate had become warmer, extending the growing season. Historians generally agree this 200-year warming trend, which contributed to agricultural production, led to a population boom, began to change, bringing cooler temperatures at the beginning of the 14th century. Secondly, there were technological advances that produced labor-saving devices. Iron was used for hammer, nails, axes, hoes, and plows. In Holland and across the Netherlands, harnessing wind power was tapped as a source of labor-saving power and the feeding of large animals to do the work of grinding grains. Third, there was a major change in planting, when a shift from the two-field system used in prehistory from 5000 BC to the three-field system of crop rotation, and it took hold, food production increased. The medieval diet was adequate when food was available. The staple of the medieval diet was peasant bread, a multi-grained, heavy sort full of vitamins, fibers, calories, and protein. The medieval diet was supplemented with the following: several pints a day of beer and ale. This was for children and adults because until recently, water was rarely safe to drink. In addition, cow cheese and milk if fresh, nuts and berries, vegetables and fruits. Chickens provided eggs and sometimes meat. Red meat was rare, only once a year, and pork a few times a year. Fish and red meat were considered food for the landed elite and other wealthy individuals or persons of importance. These were not consumed by peasants. If they were, perhaps it was for a wedding. Gradually, trade and commerce made it back to European towns with the emergence of free artisans and craftspeople not tied to the land. By the 13th century, Italian merchants had trade ports in Cairo, Damascus, and a number of Black Sea ports, were the acquired goods brought by Muslim merchants far away from India, China, and the South Sea islands of what today is known as Indonesia. Asian goods were expensive luxury items. Silks, porcelain, gunpowder, rice paper, and food products such as peaches and oranges. A peasant diet was varied in fruits, grains, eggs, cheese, and beer. Other aspects of peasant life included time off for feast days. Households were generally regulated by births, deaths, by disease, conflict, and injury. Large farm animals have a variety of uses. Outside of their labor and milk products, they give off a tremendous amount of body heat. Living with animals allowed immunity to diseases such as smallpox to take place. The more we live apart from direct animals, the more we are less immune to certain diseases, a product of clean, civilized living. There exist benefits, however, from animal-human contact. Medieval law and justice evolved from two sources that became common law practiced in Europe. These were the legacy of Roman laws promoted to society by the Christian Church and the effect of the German barbarians migrating when in a time they developed and spread through European new practices of maintaining law and order. These two judicial systems created local to royal courts throughout Europe. Medieval common law came to require an accused to prove his or her innocence. There were three ways: compurgation, ordeal, and trial by battle or combat. With the general desire for harmony and order, developed ideas of structures to serve that the basic function of law is to make human action more regular and predictable. There were three types of medieval courts. Ecclesiastical, these are church courts presided over by a bishop in which cases that were sought were against God, such as marriage issues, foul language, and more. Landed aristocrats held manor courts. These were usually issues including property violations, public drunkenness, assault, theft. Punishments would include heavy fines, public humiliation. They would be held in village meetings, usually in a tavern, presided over by the local lord. Cases including murder, rape, poaching royal game, cutting down trees from royal forests, and treason against the state or burglary, these were capital crimes seen in royal courts presided over by a king or another royal. These were large events. Medieval cities were fortified type enclosures, usually built with high stone walls and a gate set at intervals. Thus, space and time, with continued population growth, reached a premium. Streets were narrow and dark. Housing was not built in an organized fashion and regulated by city codes. Population and pollution ran hand in hand. Living in medieval times was not pleasant. Towns exhibited strong smells from filth rotting in piles and human waste in the streets or along entry doors. This, of course, is connected to the miasma theory. While master guildsmen and fathers taught their sons and apprentices how to become craftsmen, quality control developed over time in medieval Europe. By the 11th century, guild members maintained standards of their crafts.